Welcome to another QuantInsti webinar. Today, we have a session on ChatGPT for quants. This session will be conducted by Vivek Krishnamoorthy, who is Head of Content and Research at QuantInsti.
So welcome folks for a second session on a similar subject. So hopefully there's not too much overlap in terms of what I'll talk about today and what my friend and colleague Varun covered a few weeks back. Yeah. So let's jump straight ahead into today's topic. So I'm going to now put my screen on full. Let me start the slideshow. All right, so the topic for the day is ChatGPT for quants. All right, so this is like a customary disclaimer. This is entirely being done for educational purposes. So, any kind of investments and trading that you do in the financial markets does involve risk. So you need to take personal decisions based on any kind of capital that you deploy anywhere. So things that we talk about, trading strategies or anything related to that is for informational and educational purposes. We do not know your specific circumstances, your investment goals and so on. So we make no such recommendations in a presentation like this, right? All right. So this is a pretty instructive line said by one of the leading authorities in the field of AI and I'd say large language models, considering the revolution that has enveloped the world since what, like hardly 6-7 months. When we think about it, it's pretty mind-boggling that ChatGPT hasn't even been around for a year. It was released sometime in November of last year. I think I remember reading somewhere that it's the fastest growing tech product in the history of technology. Because of the speed at which it got adopted. So obviously there's a lot of excitement around it, and people all across the world are using it in various contexts, right? And the reason for that is that the manner in which we interface with the computer and with such a powerful technology is almost like talking to someone, right, in English. All right. So with that little preamble, let me talk about what I want to cover today. So we have a number of things that I'd like to touch upon. So we'll first talk a little bit about AI, which is I'd say like the superset of whatever we are discussing, which is like the eagle's eye view. Then we come down a few thousand feet and we look at generative AI, which is closer home towards what we are looking at. And then finally, we get back straight down into the trenches to look at large language models, which is LLMs, and more specifically, ChatGPT, right? We'll talk about use cases for ChatGPT. So all of the illustrations that I'm going to talk about are pertaining to financial markets and trading. Not just trading, I'd say even a little bit of research and stuff. We also want to, so I also want to move slightly beyond ChatGPT to talk about two other pretty exciting tools that we have out there. One of them is called Auto-GPT and the other is called LangChain. So we'll have a brief glimpse at both of these and what they help us do in terms of overcoming or going slightly beyond what ChatGPT can do for us. I'm going to try and speculate or forecast what the future of trading strategies is going to be. Hopefully that should give us some idea as to what we can do to future-proof ourselves, right? If we want to be in this industry, and what are the kind of knowledge and skills that we need in order to thrive in this kind of environment. And the last thing I'll touch upon are some ethical implications of these kind of powerful technologies when they get used so widely in the financial markets. So before we go ahead, I want to get a slide picture about what the backgrounds of you guys are. So Kshitij, if you can, please release the poll. I'd like to see, know a little bit more about our audience today.
Sure. So let me launch the poll. Okay, so here are the options. I have never or rarely used ChatGPT or other large language models. I have used ChatGPT, but not for trading. I have tried using ChatGPT for trading, and I regularly use ChatGPT for trading. These are the options. So far, so 59% of the audience have said that they have used ChatGPT, but not for trading, and 29% of the audience has said that I have never or rarely used ChatGPT. So yeah, and then other two options are 5 and 6. So most of them have used ChatGPT, but not for trading, and like 29% of them have never used ChatGPT.
All right, perfect. Thanks for that, Kshitij.
So let me hide the results. Now you can
The
resume
kind of
sharing your
background
screen.
that
Yeah.
I'm talking to.
Yes.
All right. So moving on. So it's good to know that more than 50% of you have used it in some form or the other. And for those of us who haven't used it, I think hopefully after this webinar, it'll ignite enough curiosity in you to try and use it in different forms, right? All right. So first, let's talk about the field of artificial intelligence in the first place. So I think uh, in the last probably 5 to 10 years, the names artificial intelligence and machine learning is kind of heard, in various places in so many different contexts, right? And AI is really, I would say, like uh, the union set of many of these fields that have become so much a part of the modern day lexicon, right? So it's a broad field and there are many different subfields. The primary aim of artificial intelligence, as the name suggests, is that you want to build intelligent entities that are non-human, right? So we are trying. So as a field, you're trying to create or understand um, entities which have nearly human intelligence, right, in terms of the things they can do. So things like weather prediction, you have these autonomous cars, driverless cars, you talk about speech recognition, image recognition. So various fields that would be applications of AI in different contexts. So, you have bots that play chess, and they've been around forever, right? And these days, the best chess players in the world are no longer human. They are all computers that have been doing that, right? And we've been talking about chess computers beating human beings for more than 20, 30 years now, from the times of Gary Kasparov in the late 80s and early 90s, right? So it's used in different contexts. Now, when we speak about AI, the part that, as far as this seminar goes, the part that we are most interested in is a field called generative AI, right? So, as the name suggests, generative AI is a type of AI system which is essentially trying to generate content, right? Now, what do I mean by content? It could be content of different shapes and sizes. So you could have content such as images, right? Where let's say you want to create the image of a sunset as seen by, say, a Picasso, or you want to create an image of walking in the park the way, say, someone like MF Hussain would have painted it, right? So those are the kind of things that image generators do. Then you have, so there's DALL-E, which is also part of one of the products released by OpenAI, the same firm that has released ChatGPT. You have Midjourney, you have Stable Diffusion, which are image generators. Similarly, you also have audio generators. Again, many products out there. MuseNet is again from the stable of OpenAI. You have Lyrebird. You also have these days code generators. So firms like GitHub have products like Copilot, which allow you to program and work on applications where you have an AI helper along with you, right? So it's called Copilot. You have companies like Tab9, which also provide you similar kind of services. So again, these are different types of content that gets generated specific to the needs of the user. And then you have, like, I would say, a generic type of text generators, which is what LLMs are, that is large language models are, where you have uh, the models such as GPT-4, which is the one which was released about 3 or 4 months back. Again, this comes from OpenAI. You have Palm 2, which is a similar kind of product from Google. You have Llama, which comes from Facebook, right? So these are essentially large language models, right? So all of these come under the same category, which is all generation of content. So this today, generative AI and specifically these large language models have become so important to, I would say, to the future of, it wouldn't be far-fetched to say humanity, that some leading voices refer to this as important a technology as electricity is, right? So Andrew Ng says that, I've heard him say that on multiple occasions in various forums about the importance of a technology like this, right? Now let's drill down deeper and look at specifically large language models. These are systems that work with human languages. So most of the systems these days that are designed work with English. It's only a matter of time before you'll have systems that work with other, spoken languages, whether it's Mandarin or Spanish or so many others, right? And what these models essentially do is they are driven by natural language processing under the hood, and they understand and generate text just the way human beings do, right? So you can ask or interface with these models by asking your questions in English, in spoken English, and the response you get also would be in spoken English, right? So traditionally, the way such systems used to work was they were made to predict the next word or the next set of words, right? And this used to happen because they were trained on large training data sets. So for many years now, when we go to Google and try to search for stuff that we're looking for, the Google search itself starts auto completing and tries to guess what it is that we're looking for based on the first 2 or 3 words, right? This happens nowadays with so many email clients also. It happens with in popular applications like WhatsApp, where when you're typing messages to someone, it gives you suggestions on what you're trying to say, right? So if you were to type something like "what are," it might tell you something like "you doing today" or "what are you up to" or some such, right? So we can choose to pick that if that is what we want to say. Now, tools like ChatGPT or Bard by Google or Bing by Microsoft, they are now slightly different from your garden variety large language models. These are what are called conversational large language models. So here, uh, what we do is we uh, talk to the model, like I mentioned a little earlier, the way we would talk to another person, right? So now let's specifically talk about ChatGPT because I'm going to spend most of my time on this specific product, right? We can call it a conversational large language model as opposed to something like a base level large language model where it's essentially trying to predict the next word or the next set of words. And it's based on a pretty exciting technology called GPT, which is generative pre-trained transformer. So this is the kind of architecture that it uses under the hood. And what it allows the user to do is you are able to ask questions to the model and sometimes even give it instructions, right? So you can either ask questions or you can provide instructions in terms of what specifically you want. And this is the form in which we interact with the model, right? So it's like talking to or interacting with a very wise friend, you can say, right? And this sort of mode of interaction is what we call prompts, right? So technically we refer to those as prompts, the instructions that we provide to the model. And uh, truly speaking, prompts are pretty much programming now in English, right? Because that is essentially the way you're going to get your tasks done, right? So as opposed to traditional programming where we are again trying to get tasks done, we type it in the language in which we are operating, right? So if you're working with Python, your code is written in Python. If you're working with C# or C++, you will be writing your programs in those languages. Here, since we are dealing with large language models that are trained on so much of text, unstructured text, human generated text, that uh, they are able to understand even English, right? Conversational English or even technical English for that matter, right? So that's how we deal with these models. And this whole technique which we use in order to interact with these bots or these tools like ChatGPT is what is called prompt engineering. So again, it's become a pretty important area for people to, I would say, pick up even as a skill, right? In this current day and age. Now let's come to the quant traders part, right? So what can quant traders do with a tool like ChatGPT? Well, as quant traders, we are at different stages also in our lives, right? So sometimes we are aspiring quant traders. So and I would say we are uh, early students of the field, right? Even seasoned traders can consider themselves to be students of the field. And I think that wherever you are in your level of experience, you can use a tool like ChatGPT to get a better understanding of ideas or concepts which you're not very sure of. You can use it to debug code that has been written in any language, including Python. You can use it to generate code snippets for certain tasks that you need to do. To summarize trading ideas that you may come across. You may come across it in maybe a paper or in some article which is like very long, and you may not have the time to read through multiple such articles. You can use it to gauge sentiment, right? It's so these kind of tools are very powerful at gauging sentiment, the kind that you see in natural language processing, in articles and newspapers. And maybe you might be able to use it to generate trading ideas or strategies. I'm pretty skeptical about the last point, but nevertheless something that people do try from time to time, right? So now let's jump into some use cases specific to ChatGPT. All right. So for the use cases, what I'm going to do is I'm going to walk us through certain parts from this Jupyter notebook that I have. So the first part is you may have certain conceptual questions, right? So what I've done here is I have run these kind of, so I specified these prompts, and we will see what are the kind of responses we got, right? So conceptual question could be, as a student of finance, I get this I get this question asked a lot by my younger students or my newer students, which is when you talk about OHL CV data, that is the open, high, low, close daily data, there's a column called close, and there's also a column called adjusted close. So what is the difference between these two, right? And when I typed this on ChatGPT, so for those of us who haven't seen it, this is how it looks, the interface of ChatGPT. So you can go to chat.openai.com. You need to basically log in and access it. So I'm not going to log in and stuff right now. For now, what I want to show you is that you can essentially log in and then type your question. So something like, what's the difference? And it gives you a pretty detailed answer, right? The difference is how they account for corporate actions. I don't want to get into the specifics of the explanation. Although what I do want to point is that it gives you a pretty detailed explanation, the sort of explanation that a person like me has to do as part of my job, right? Because me and other members of our content team often encounter this question asked to us by students, right? And this is a pretty solid explanation if you go through it. And a typical follow-up question could be, explain this with an example, right? So you're analyzing the stock of a hypothetical company called ABC, and it gives you a response. But this doesn't look very convenient because I copy pasted all of this into Markdown, and some of this has not got rendered very well, right? So knowing that I want to use it for this purpose, my next follow-up question to this was, in the example above, firstly I wanted real historical data of an S&P firm to show the difference, and I wanted the response in Markdown because the text did not render properly, right? So this is the response I got from ChatGPT, which says, I apologize for the confusion, but this is instructive. It says, as an AI language model, I don't have direct access to real-time or historical financial data, including specific stock prices of individual S&P 500 firms. So this is an important point for us to note, because it also tells us gives us an idea of its limitations, right? It says my responses are generated based on general knowledge and patterns derived from the text I've been trained on. So if you want to access real historical data, I recommend utilizing financial data platforms or market research. So it tells you that this is something I can't do. Now, as far as giving me a toy example, it is now shared it gave me the response in Markdown, which is why now it's got rendered quite nicely, right? So some historical price data for some XYZ, and it gives me open, high, low and stuff for, some 5-6 days. And it gives me the explanation. So here you have XYZ and S&P firm, and it tells you on day one this happened, and the adjustment happens because of so and so reasons, right? Now, another question that gets asked to me quite often is when people are on this subject, is people would say, okay, what should I use when I'm backtesting a trading strategy, right? So when backtesting, even I prefer to use adjusted close rather than close, and it gives some reasons why, right? Using the close price without accounting might lead to misleading results and inaccurate performance evaluations and so on. Again, I'm essentially typing what I get asked. But in actual trading, we work with close prices. So wouldn't the results be misleading if I rely on adjusted close? So again, it gives me a counter explanation for that. So you're correct. Transactions are done this way. However, these are the reasons why it's preferred. And it tells me ultimately the choice depends on your requirements and objectives. If you're interested in analyzing real-time trading performances, you may use close. However, for back testing, you should use adjusted close, right? So in some sense, something like a ChatGPT should, probably make me feel a bit threatened, right? My job seems to be under threat because this is something I do quite a bit on a weekly basis. Questions that I either get asked verbally or via email or so many other ways, and a tool which which has been around for barely 6 months is able to explain things which I have been probably studying since maybe the age of 25 or so. So I've been studying for this for many years now, and yet here's a tool that's kind of learned all these things in a matter of a few months, right? Not just this, I mean, in so many different fields. All right, so this is one set of questions, some conceptual questions that we may have. So we've seen a few use cases on conceptual questions and follow-up questions. Again, what is interesting to note is the context of each question is preserved in the memory of ChatGPT, right? So when I ask a follow-up question, all the previous things that it has told me or it has written to me is very much it's very much aware of the things that have already been spoken about. So it's not like every question is a fresh new question, which also makes it kind of powerful. Okay, so suppose I want to programming based questions, right? I want to debug certain errors that I've encountered. So my prompt was, I ran the below Python code and I'm getting an error. What is the mistake, right? So then I just copy paste a Python snapshot of a Python code. So there's a bunch of inputs. There's a date that's being set saying it's today. There's this is the end date, and the start date is 200 days before the end date. And I want to download the data for Nifty, which is the Indian benchmark index called, which includes the top 50 market capitalized firms. So it's like we have S&P 500, which is the top 500 firms. The Nifty includes the top 50 firms in India, market cap wise. So I'm looking for 1 minute data for the last 200 days, right? So the response that the bot gives me is to identify the mistake, it would be helpful to know the exact error message, which is again part of the kind of questions that me and my team also encounter regularly. And it is even telling me what the possible issues are. It could be with the Y Finance library or the availability of data for the specified time range. And it gives me some things to consider. And at the end, it says, by examining the error message, I'll be able to identify and resolve. If you provide the specific error, I can offer more targeted assistance. So what I did was I typed this. I got the error, module not found, no module named. So it has interpreted that it means this specific library was not installed, and it even tells me steps to install it. So I went ahead, installed it, followed the procedure, and now I get this error. failed download, and this is the error message. Only 7 days worth of 1 minute granularity data are allowed to be fetched per request. So it tells me that the error message says that the data is not available for the specified time range. Yahoo Finance restricts the amount of historical data you can fetch at high granularity, like 1 minute intervals. And it even tells me specifically what the error is with respect to 1 minute granularity. Now, this is quite sophisticated in terms of the kind of things that the tool is able to do, right? And it even tells me to resolve this issue, you can modify a code to fetch data at a lower granularity or reduce the time range to comply with their limitations. So it gives me an example for fetching daily data instead, right? Now, again, this could have gone on where I said, no, I don't want daily data. I'm still interested in 1 minute data. Are there any other sources and so on, right? So it has the ability to do these things. So this is where we have used it to debug something. What if we want to generate code snippets? So I said I want to use Quandl to download oil prices. Please generate Python code for it. So it generates a certain amount of Python code. Now the thing with this is it again highlights one of the, I would say, limitations of something like a ChatGPT is that the company Quandl has been acquired by NASDAQ, I think about a year or two back. And because of that, the library that is nowadays used is a library called NASDAQ Data Link. So Quandl it doesn't work all the time. So, and since ChatGPT is only, I'm talking about the free version, is only trained until data up to I think mid of 2021, it probably doesn't know that this is not going to work, or this is going to be quite troublesome in getting to work, right? So something for us to keep in mind again, right? So a couple of things that it highlights to us is, one, it also needs us to be aware of things. So if I'm a complete newbie in that field and I rely entirely on the kind of responses I get from ChatGPT, I will go wrong quite a few times here and there, right? I'm not in a position to assess or appraise the kind of output I'm getting, right? So these are things to keep in mind in terms of some of the limitations, and I'll talk about that a little later in more detail. Okay, another big area that people talk about is summarizing ideas or generating ideas, right? So suppose I come across an article. So I picked this up from our blog, the QuantInsti blog. So I'll first show you guys this article. So this was written by one of our students who did it as part of his as a trading project, a student from China, Ching Tao. So what he did was he had an idea saying he wanted to implement the statistical arbitrage or pairs trading with a certain data set that he's spoken about, and he's explained in detail what he's tried to do, right? Motivation, outline, what he's doing, and so on. It's a pretty long article. Now, suppose I don't have the time to read the whole thing, but I want a short summary of what's going on. I can even do that where it summarizes the idea. So I've said summarize the trading idea in this article in up to 100 words. So what it tells me is it explores a trading idea in the China futures market, and it gives me some idea what the person is trying to do, right? So again, it's able to save some time for me. I can ask it even more specific questions like what are the buy signals and sell signals and so on, right? Okay, so this is summarizing ideas. How about generating ideas? So if I were to say something like, what are the consistently profitable techniques for quant retail traders trading in the equity markets? Or if I say, generate me a profitable strategy, I encourage you to try those kind of things, right? So when you do something like that, it gives you a pretty, I'd say, bland response, right? It's not going to be able to give you a very clear answer because firstly, you haven't shared enough information. Secondly, there are so many things which are very specific to your needs, which don't get captured in the prompt that you've shared, right? So it starts off saying, profitable techniques can vary depending on things like market conditions, trading styles, and so on. And it gives you some style. So algorithmic trading, statistical arbitrage, momentum trading, mean reversion, and so on. Right? It's not a particularly. It's almost like a, I'd say, not even a very good textbook answer, but nevertheless it gives you some sort of response. Right? So basically, all of these different use cases should give us an idea as to what are the kind of places where you're getting good responses and what are the kind of places where you get not so good responses. Right? Now, there are certain things that it clearly can't do. For instance, I want to know, let's say, what was McDonald's revenue in the first quarter of 2023. Now, knowing that ChatGPT only has data access until 2021, what I did was I pointed it to the earnings release document on the McDonald's website, right? But ChatGPT clearly tells me that I don't have direct access to external files or the ability to browse the internet. My responses are based on information available until September 21. So I cannot check the specific document or give you exact figures from this time. So to find the most up-to-date and accurate information, go to the website, right? So all of this, the sum total of all this is we are getting some idea as to what it can do and what it can't do, right? As budding quant traders, right? So it's able to do a little bit of it's able to do the first one pretty well, even the second one quite well. Generating code snippets, I think it's a mixed bag. Summarizing, it seems to be able to do well. Those are the kind of things we saw today. And the last one, not so much, right? Okay. So now I want to talk about another of these models, which is called AutoGPT, right? So AutoGPT is also based on the same kind of architecture, I'd say, the same GPT kind of architecture. However, there's a big difference between what AutoGPT say can do compared to say a ChatGPT. So first of all, AutoGPT has the ability to take its own decisions. So it's not only going to rely on giving you some answer and stopping there. It can also, in fact, create some of its own prompts, and it will check with you whether it should go ahead with that. And I would say the key difference between why it's able to do that compared to say a ChatGPT is because it has what are called AI agents. Now, each of these autonomous AI agents are able to take ownership of a certain part of that action that needs to be taken. So this is, I would say, like the equivalent of, let's say we were to hire a cab to go from our home to our workplace, right? So this is like an agent who has a specific mandate, which is to drive you from your home to your place of work, right? So the task is pretty well defined, and this person can do it without you having to tell this driver you need to take a left or a right or go slow, go fast, or all of that, right? This person is equipped to do that. Similarly, once you reach your workplace, you'll have a cafeteria where the chef and the cooks there, their job is to provide a certain set of dishes. So if you would like to go have certain dishes there, you can go and have it there, right? So you have different agents who do narrow parts of a certain job, and something like an AutoGPT gives you that. It also prompts after each step, asking the user whether to proceed or not, right? So let's now look at a simple use case where we use AutoGPT, all right? So suppose we want to create a portfolio consisting of 10 stocks from the S&P 500. So when you install it and you run it, so this is how the local server looks. So I'm not sure if my screen is very clearly visible. Let me increase the size of my visibility so that you guys can see my screen clearly. So here, if you can see it, it says once you run it, it says things like all packages are installed, and it says welcome to AutoGPT. Some news about AutoGPT, and then eventually the remaining parts, what I have done is rather than having screenshots, I've copy pasted stuff to make it a bit easier for us to view it. So let me go back and make it 100%. So when I so AutoGPT asked me what I need, right? So this is what my prompt was: create an investment portfolio using a capital of 10,000 US dollars spread across US equities. I would like it to be a growth focused portfolio, and your stock universe is the S&P 500 stocks. Now this part onwards got generated by the by AutoGPT. So it says all files and directories created by this agent can be found in the workspace, and it's given me the space on my computer. And it has created, so AutoGPT has this idea where it creates what is called a persona. And my persona is called IAP GPT. So the name is IAP, which is basically an intelligent autonomous portfolio manager. So intelligent autonomous portfolio manager GPT that specializes in creating growth focused investment portfolios using a capital of 10,000. So what it does is it tells me its goals. So it says conduct thorough research and analysis of the S&P 500 to identify high growth companies, optimize the allocation, monitor the performance, and make necessary adjustments to ensure it remains aligned with growth focus, provide updates and reports, and stay up to date with market trends and news. Right. So it's I had to set up quite a few things at the back end. So it uses GPT-4, which is basically, or rather 3.5 in my case, and via my browser, it's doing a lot. So it first tells me that I need to gather information to identify, and it's going to use web search to do that. It gives me, so this is the thought which it shares. Then the reasoning is by conducting a web search, I can access information about these stocks, including financial data and so on, to help me make informed decisions, right? And eventually plan. Using it, analyze. It even tells me, gives me this saying criticism. I need to ensure that I gather all this. It's important to evaluate it critically. And after it does all that, it will ask me. The next action that it wants to do is web search, which is query is S&P 500 stocks. I need to enter why if I want to authorize it. If I want to give why for multiple commands, I can even say why, 3 times or 4 times. Or I can give it feedback saying you're not on the right path. So I clicked Y. So it says command web search return, and then it has pulled out a bunch of different articles on Business Insider, some quotes, WSJ, Wikipedia, Market Watch, and many other links, right? And it's planning to use browse website to gather more information. So this is all, processing of text, and it gives me again detailed plans using the browse, explore, and so on. And this is how it goes on, right? So essentially what is happening is it is taking ownership of the entire process and starts doing it step by step, asking me at every stage. Now, obviously, actually getting it all running involves installing a bunch of different things, which is outside the scope of what we are talking about, and allowing it to edit files, create Python commands, create Python programs and run them and so on, right? Because it needs to do a lot of analysis for it to come up with those 10 stocks. So one has to obviously be, reasonably comfortable with the tools before we start giving our GPT or AutoGPT the permission to do all these things, right? Okay, so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back to the slides to talk about LangChain, and then the last couple of things, and then we'll open it up for Q&A. I'll take a look at the questions. All right. So we saw what AutoGPT can do. Now, if we were to look at something like LangChain, what it does is it enables the user to connect to an LLM and also connect to data sources, right? So even AutoGPT kind of allows you to do that. LangChain gives you, it works pretty well even in conjunction with something like an AutoGPT. So here also you have AI agents who pursue predefined goals. And the idea here is you're trying to chain together different tasks. So the output of your first task becomes the input for the second. The output of your second task becomes the input of your third, so that eventually you get your goal. So basically, it's like you're broken down into a set of your big task into a set of smaller chunks, and you're executing each of them separately, right? So if you were to look at LangChain and what it does, so I created this financial statement analyzer where I had the LangChain go through this specific annual report. So an annual report typically is like a 100, 200 page document. This document is like what, about, let's see how many pages this is. This seems to be a 110 odd page document. It's got a lot of information. It's from Pfizer, and it is their annual report, I think, for the year 2022, right? So when I ran it, I mean, going through this and trying to find answers there is not the, I mean, it takes a reasonable amount of comfort with, going through financial statements and stuff. Now, what this tool does is I created this statement analyzer where I said what was the annual revenue and how much did it grow over last year. So it gives me an answer like the annual revenue was 100.3 million and it grew by 23% from 2021. Then the next question was provide a financial summary of the report in 100 words. Now, since this didn't get rendered properly, I pulled out what came out from the, I would say the local server, which is another place where the same data gets captured. And it says Pfizer reported total revenues of 100.3 billion, increase of 23% compared to 21. Gives you some details on net cash flow, EPS, and so on, right? So you can verify all this data from the actual report, and you will find that it's pretty good in terms of accuracy and so on. So again, what these things kind of demonstrate to you is that these kind of tools are pretty powerful once you start slightly expanding the kind of things you can do with them, right? So coming back to now that we've seen so many different use cases of ChatGPT, AutoGPT, LangChain and stuff, if we were to, sort of be like oracles where we are trying to imagine what the future of trading is going to look like, I'd wager that with this kind of, AI revolution that we are in the midst of, I think one can safely say that we are going to have more sophisticated models in financial markets in terms which drive the decision making, right, for buys and sells. And this current generation, the GPT-4s and the Palm 2s of the world are very good at sentiment analysis of unstructured textual data. So the more people start using these kind of tools, I think the alpha, that is the extra, I'd say, returns people who are getting using these specific techniques, it's going to go down because more and more people will start adopting these techniques. Another thing I think we can expect to see is that there will be a combination of different sorts of approaches, right? You have machine learning techniques, you have, I'd say, time series forecasting techniques, you have NLP based techniques. So all of these together can be combined along with quant models to improve the quality of price prediction, right? This is something we can expect. And when you talk about traders and even professionals in other fields, we will collaborate more and more with machines. So the kind of output that gets generated is really a combination of what man and machine both are kind of contributing to generate, right? Be that as it may, and despite the power that LLMs have in today's day and age, they still are kind of generating whatever they do based on the text that already exists, created and written by humans for the most part, right? So I think there's still a lot of cachet for high-level expertise, which humans possess in certain narrow fields, right? So the kind of ideas and creativity that one can have will continue, in my view, to be highly valued because it's not easy to come up with ideas, right? You need to spend a lot of time and have a very deep understanding of subjects to be able to come up with ideas and come up with some independent ideas, right? So I think that's very much going to be around. And probably I would say essentially with the help of these tools, right, our productivity would go up, right? A person who is not so comfortable with programming will become a better programmer. An expert level programmer will become an even better programmer, right? So in general, it will lift the level of every one of us in terms of what we can do, right? And expand in terms of expanding our capacities. So specific to this kind of world that we are already inhabiting, what are the kind of knowledge and skills that you need? Well, I think domain-specific knowledge will always trump everything else, right? So whichever field that we come from, and since we here are all aspiring to be or are already quant traders, understanding financial markets, the different types of asset classes that exist, the market microstructure effects that come into play when we talk about price discovery and so on. All of these things are very important. And being able to, I would say, combine these things along with math and stats, because that's what quant finance does, will continue to remain important. And programming is very much part of this mix, right? So having familiarity and being accustomed to the data science stack, and plus additionally being comfortable with machine learning, natural language processing in the programming side of things will all, I think, together help us, carve out uh, a secure spot for ourselves in this field. And I think probably the most important difference compared to probably what I might have spoken about a year back and now is to learn to use LLMs effectively, right? And essentially what I'm talking about is prompt engineering. How do you phrase your questions correctly? How do you provide the right kind of context so that you're able to get useful outputs from these kind of tools, right? Because all of this is also going to help you improve the quality of things that you produce, as well as in terms of even the learning process that you're going through. And finally, the last thing I want to mention is there are certain ethical implications when you talk about things like the presence of AI or the constant presence of AI in financial markets. So I would say the first thing is that since in general, data sets are going to be biased, right? There's very little objective data that exists out there. I'm talking about unstructured text-based data. So since LLMs are trained on data sets which invariably are biased, these biases are going to get internalized or reinforced, right? So one has to be careful about what are the kind of data that we are feeding into our LLMs. So I think creators of these models have this additional responsibility thrust upon them, where you need to try and ensure that there is adequate diversity of opinions and the kind of data that's fed, so that the models themselves can be relatively unbiased. And I think the even more bigger important question is who owns the output rights of the kind of things created by LLMs, right? Since LLMs are fed with so much of text data, a lot of it comes from books written by experts in the field or articles written by experts in the field, and all of that is together contributing to the kind of output that you get, right? Now, when we were talking about something like DALL-E or Midjourney or any of these which use music or imagery, you can still trace the inspiration back. But what about text-based stuff, right? So the program that is generated by, say, ChatGPT, who knows? It comes from some program written by somebody in a book, right? And how do you attribute credit to that person or to that individual, right? So that is, I think, how do the creators or the right holders of the rights to those creations, how do they capture some value that gets created here? And that is, I think, something which will probably, and because it's so new, I don't think we even have very good answers for these things, right? I'm sure that will keep lawyers in business, because this is essentially all about IP and stuff, right? So all of this needs to be figured out, and that's, I think, a subject unto itself. So I think that's pretty much it in terms of the things that I wanted to cover. So if you want to continue the learning with QI, with QuantInsti, we have like tons of material out there. We have books, free books that you can access. We have Quantra, which has many different courses on various subjects at different levels, free as well as paid. Feel free to take a spin there. We have Blue Shift, which is a research and trading platform, has access to lots of different types of data, US and India specifically, including tick by tick data for certain asset classes. And you have the QuantInsti blogs, which is a treasure trove of information of, again, all sorts of things. So I'd encourage you to go there. And yeah, I think I'd like to open up the session for Q&A.
Thank you for this wonderful session, Vivek. I will now request everyone to put their questions in the questions panel. And meanwhile, you guys are putting your questions. I would also like to quickly highlight the super early bird offer on EPAT course. So if you want to get a job in quantitative trading domain or want to start your own algo trading desk, EPAT is the course which you want to explore. And super early bird admissions for the next EPAT batch are open now for a limited time. So you can get on a free EPAT counseling call to know more about benefits like lifetime career assistance, lifetime course access, dedicated support manager, and then project mentorship, and many other features and advantages. So I've shared the link of free EPAT counseling call with you. So in the chat, so you can explore that, connect with our expert, and he'll be able to help you with your learning objectives. And yeah, so now moving ahead with the Q&A. So Vivek, so we have received a lot of questions already, and I have flagged some of them. I have also flagged some of them red, yellow. So based on that, you can pick. And I think we are still getting a lot of questions. So since there was some connectivity issue, so we may extend the session by 10 minutes to answer these questions. So over to you, Vivek. You can pick in any order.
Sure, thanks. So I think I'm going to pick the ones that I can answer quickly first. So William asks, what is NLP in the second bullet? NLP is natural language processing. It is where you're using these kind of computers and programs to parse through text written by human beings. So the input to these kind of natural language processing algorithms could be the works of Shakespeare, it could be poetry, it could be articles written on firms, research reports. So everything that you can think of that has been written by human beings, written by humans for humans in human languages, right? So that is essentially what natural language processing is. I think a number of people were asking about whether the notebooks would be shared. Yes, they would be shared. Ankit asks, do you think in future we would not need to learn Python? AutoGPT will convert our English commands to Python and then backtest. This is an interesting question, Ankit. My sense is, and I'm going out on a limb here, is that you would need to still learn programming at least to a certain level. Perhaps we need not be very sophisticated programmers as opposed to say maybe a few years back because of these kind of tools that are at our disposal. But can you be entirely divorced from the world of programming? I very much doubt that, because as I said earlier, the benefit of these kind of tools is it in general increases your productivity or your efficiency, right? So if you are already a good, intermediate level programmer, it's probably going to help you amp it up by a couple of notches. So what that implies is that you still need a certain basic level of knowledge to be able to, even figure out how best to use it, and also how to detect errors. Because one important thing about these tools is, right, these models also make mistakes, and they say that. And the only way you'll be able to detect those mistakes is if you have some degree of familiarity with the subject, right? It's called models hallucinate. It's the same word that we use, the way we use it for human beings, and models do hallucinate. So that is something to keep in mind. Cindy asks, what is the future of LLM in trading? Can you imagine? Well, I've tried to hazard a guess in one of my slides, Cindy. I did speak about the fact that I think there will be an explosion in terms of the amount of sentiment analysis that gets, I would say, mainstreamed into trading and investment decisions. So that is one of the things I mentioned, and there are a few others I've mentioned as bullet points. So if you go back to my slide deck, which we will put it out there in a few hours, you probably can revisit it. Rakesh asks, how powerful will they be as tools for doing sentiment analysis, which is not really accessible for the average trader? I think that's a good question again. I think they will be quite accessible, more accessible than they were. I would say even ChatGPT is pretty good at sentiment analysis. Only problem with ChatGPT is that you'll need to figure out how you'll store your data and stuff like that. The other thing what we have done is we have directly used ChatGPT only in its chat avatar. So if you start using the API underlying it, right, it gets even more powerful. So I think they will be. So the short answer to your question is I think it will be very powerful as a sentiment analysis tool. Okay, I'm not sure how to pronounce your name, but let me say Bongiseri asks, share or demonstrate how you get AutoGPT and ChatGPT running. Okay, I will share these notebooks, but actually getting them working is a pretty involved process. I'd suggest you write into us if you want to know those details. I'm not sure it's possible for me to share all of that in a short document or some such. So Pratyush asks, how can I compare the financial statements of 10 banks of 10 years using LangChain? Yeah, I mean, I shared a use case here. One will have to essentially create probably a for loop to have it parse through multiple PDF documents, cull out the information required. More importantly, I think one might have to also take a paid subscription from, say, depending on the LLM that we are using. So if you're using, for instance, GPT, you might need to use GPT-4, which comes at a a reasonably hefty cost. I think it currently costs $20 per month. So that is something you can do. Okay. Raj says the stock market has been driven by mass psychology. Will generative AI models now change data-driven markets? So indicators may expose. So in any case, we are moving towards, I think, in general, I would say markets. I'm not quite sure I agree with your statement, but by and large, what happens with markets is they're quite efficient at price discovery. And with all these kind of tools becoming more and more a part of, financial analysis, it certainly is an evolution in data-driven decisions. So that's what I'd say. Dhairya asks, how will these models be able to detect noise in the data that gets for sentiment analysis, say via Twitter or news articles? Well, the beauty of something like sentiment analysis is, right, when you start aggregating information, it is actually able to winnow out the signal from the noise. The noise factor comes more into play when you are looking at, maybe just a few tweets or a few news articles. But if you start looking at things at the aggregate level, usually the noise factor reduces considerably. So Prathamesh asks, I'm pursuing a master's in data science. What should I primarily focus on to become more competitive? I think you should probably get in touch with our team, Prathamesh, to get to the specifics of what you want. But in general, if you want to get into quant research, quant trading, start reading more about finance. I mean, and all the stuff that you do in data science, work with data sets that are specific to financial markets at the very least. That is like the short answer to what you should do. If you want a more detailed answer, you should get in touch with us. Marcos asks, can you tell us where we can get access to AutoGPT and LangChain tools? So the AutoGPT and LangChain that I use, right, I'm essentially using it via the APIs. So if you want to do that, I've shared links to their documentation page. Let me show you the page I'm referring to. If you go to these pages, right, it starts telling you how you can set things up. And there are several dependencies that you need to install based on the system that you have, whether it's Windows or Mac or Linux based. And you need to have all those things installed. And yeah, and then your system is up and running, and then you can, play around with it and see how it goes. John asks, how do you access AutoGPT? Again, the same thing as what I told Marcos. So take a look at the documentation, install a bunch of things, and yeah, and then that's how things get going there. I mean, you basically have to install stuff and then try things. Okay, Victor asks, is AutoGPT able to generate a backtest library by itself in, say, Zipline? That's a very interesting question. I haven't tried it, Victor, but I do know that AutoGPT has this amazing ability to correct its own code and stuff. So I don't know, maybe you'll have to try it out. If you do try it out, I'd love to hear what comes out of it. I haven't tried it, specifically what you asked me now. Tony asks, what concerns do you have about sharing code with OpenAI and others? Yeah, this is a very tricky and an important question because this is one of those privacy concerns, right? It's part and parcel of, I think, the world we live in today, right? Whether it's via social media or via these tools. What concerns do I have? I guess companies like OpenAI are trying to tighten up their own data management. My gut feeling is that if you take a paid account with these guys, they will be more careful with their data. But hey, that's a entirely personal, not very well informed opinion. All right. Yeah. Okay, Rajiv asks, it seems that ChatGPT is elementary compared to the capabilities of AutoGPT and LangChain. Do we have courses to learn about these two and how to effectively use them? So there are no direct courses to how to effectively use them in trading, to answer your question, at least at this point in time. Uh, we at QI are doing what we can, and there are several things that we are doing internally to try and answer or at least address some of the things that you mentioned here. I would say ChatGPT is still very powerful. Yes, you're right about the fact that it has certain limitations which AutoGPT and LangChain try to solve. So that is true. Nevertheless, ChatGPT by itself is still very powerful. I mean, a tool like ChatGPT, I think, can be a bit threatening to many of us and our jobs, including me, yours truly. I mean, the kind of things I do for a living here, which is teaching, writing, speaking, all of that. This tool, which has been around for like 6 months, it does it pretty well, right? It's able to understand finance. It's able to talk about finance very clearly and explain it in so many different ways, different types of questions. It's able to do that with code. It's able to do that with debugging. So yeah, I mean, I'd say I'm more excited than scared, but that's how I feel. I mean, personally about the presence of these tools. Okay, just going through and checking if there are more questions that have been flagged. Okay, Akash asks, since everyone will be using GPT and other AI tools, what do you think would be the future of trading and investing? In future, AI tools will be used to develop strategy and everyone is going to use it. Yeah, I mean, yes, I think essentially what is going to happen, my sense is, Akash, that we will build these tools and kind of monitor what these tools are doing and whether they are, working the way we'd like them to work, right? So, but yes, I think they are going to become more and more a part of the entire process of the creation and execution of strategies. So, I mean, right now, I think I would say the last 6 to 8 months, technologically speaking, it has moved so fast that it almost seems like we've leapfrogged like 10 years. So when we were at the end of 2022, I don't think most of us would have guessed where we would have been by the middle of 2023, right? It almost, to me, it almost feels like we are in the middle of 2033, considering where we were at the end of 2022. Okay, Aryan asks, I'm an engineering student. What should be a roadmap of quant finance or trading or being a researcher for me? Again, so much loaded in that question. I'd say I spoke about the different, so it's a cross interdisciplinary field. So considering the sub-disciplines in it, which is programming, math, and markets, you should be working on each of those three things. Since you come from an engineering background, I think you should be somewhat comfortable with the computer science or the programming bits, but there's still, stuff that you might want to add there. The financial markets is where you're probably going to be, uh, you know, least informed or least comfortable with. So that is the part, again, you should be working more on, and the math and stats specific to what we need in confidence. So again, please visit our blog, speak to some of our guys. They can also guide you on the subject. Okay, Hemant Kumar asks, I've created manual strategy on MT4 using multiple indicators. Is it possible to convert the strategy to auto trading pot? I think you can try doing it, Hemant Kumar. So the thing is with these models, right? You have to. So it's like this. You have this really smart friend, and you are asking her a question, right, about your personal life, professional life, a question like this, and you're hoping she gives you, an answer that is helpful. So I would say you'll have to write this on, say, a tool like ChatGPT, see what response you get. So if you get a very generic response, you'll need to share more data or more details so that it's able to customize the reply for you. So if you remember, even when I first just copy pasted a code snippet and asked, and I said to ChatGPT that I'm getting an error, it first gives me a response saying that error could be because of one or two reasons. And when I started sharing more information on what the error was, the response got more useful to me, right? So the same principle is applicable here also. It comes down to prompt engineering, a term I used in this webinar, something which should help you, get to something like converting of a strategy into, an auto trading pot. Marcos asks, can these documents that LangChain go through be in Spanish or Swedish? I don't know, Marcos. My sense is it should be available, but you'll probably have to check their documents and their documentation to see how much support is there for other languages. Okay, Vithal asks, can you share statistics on productivity numbers like increase number of trades or increase in profit after using LLM? So Vithal, LLMs have been around for a really short period of time. I don't think there's that much information still out there. There's one interesting paper I had come across recently. Let me see if I can remember that paper name. It's a research paper that I came across. Okay. So I had read this paper a few weeks back. Maybe if it's something that interests you, you can take a look at it. I'll share this paper and give it to all whoever is interested. If you want, you can take a look at it. Victor asks, is AutoGPT able to place orders at IB by himself? I think it's possible. You need to tinker around with the kind of permissions you give. There are several different, I'd say, packages that would need to be installed for it to be possible. But I think it's possible. Okay, Japal Choi asks, what's your opinion on making web scraping pipeline with ChatGPT? Web crawl data usually have high maintenance costs. I actually don't have a view on this, Jaipal. I haven't. I mean, I'll need to think about this question you've asked me. So probably you can write into us, and I can give you a more. I need to think about the question. It's an interesting question. I don't have an answer offhand. Okay, Prathamesh asks, can you give any rough estimate about how long it should take if one wants to get a good command over algo trading and quite good knowledge of financial markets? So it depends on your background, Prathamesh. I don't know you. I don't know what you've studied and what you've done so far in life. So hard to tell. But considering I know nothing about you and what your present base level knowledge is, I would say anything between 6 to 12 months. Vikyat Valmikam asks, what do you think of the valuation of companies by ChatGPT? I have a lot of doubts about it because first of all, ChatGPT has the free version at least has information only up to mid 2021. So it's nearly 2 years since then. So valuations, we know how valuations move, right? For those of us in India, we've seen what happened with Baiju, a multi-billion-dollar valued edtech firm, which is considerably lost value if we were to check it today. Okay, Rakesh asks, you demonstrated tools that can summarize an article or an annual report. Can they also summarize learnings from a video, which is 2 hours long? Again, interesting question. I'm pretty sure there would be packages out there. We'll have to combine it with some of those tools which are specific to parsing audio and video, because the large language models, at least the ones that I've been speaking about, are primarily focused on text. They are not focused on other forms of media like images or videos or audio. So most of the revolution that we've seen in the last few months or years, I'd say, the current revolution, or rather the thrust of AI research, has clustered around textual data. So I haven't paid too much attention to what's been going on in this specific neck of the woods, but I think there must be tools that do this. There must be something out there. I'm not aware of it as we speak. Amit Ghosh asks, how do we use fundamental analysis with quant analysis and predict pricing with and without GP? So there's a field called quantamental analysis, which is a combination of fundamental and quant, which combines features of both. How do you do it with and without GPT? Well, with the presence of GPT, you can at least automate parts of your work or get quicker answers to parts of the analysis part. Without it, I mean, we'll stick to typical quantamental methods. I think that's how you'll do it. Okay, Hank Buey asks, what is the relevance and future of C, C++?
Vivek, we are about to, I think we are over 21 minutes now. So this will be the last question we'll be answering. But yeah, for those of you whose questions are not answered, please make sure that at the end of this session, you will be receiving a survey. So in that survey, you can share your questions along with the feedback on the webinar and a few questions that we will be sharing. So this is the last question we'll be answering. Yeah, thanks, Vivek.
Yeah, sure. So the last question is from Hank Buey, who says, what is the relevance and future of C, C++ versus Python and quant trading and AI ChatGPT? So I think as far as HFT, which is high frequency trading goes, C and C++ still hold pride of place. I am not quite sure how. I think it will continue to stay relevant. Again, it's not something I've thought about too much. Given the presence of AI, how is HFT and specifically C, C++ going to change is something I have not sort of thought too much about. So I really don't have a very pointed answer to your question, but it's an interesting point. So the part of the answer is, I think the future still is very much there. It's going to be just as important or as the Pythons of the world in that specific part. How is the presence of ChatGPT going to impact it? I'm not sure. Don't have a clear answer for that. Great. Thanks, folks.
Great.
I think I exceeded by nearly 15-20 minutes. My apologies for the disconnection at the beginning. Hopefully, I didn't, we didn't lose too many of you folks who were irritated because of that when it happened.
No issues. I think we can completely understand, sometimes what happens. So thank you so much, Vivek, again, for taking out your valuable time and conducting such a wonderful session and answering so many questions. I'm sure our audience loved it. And to our audience, I'll repeat again, in case any of your questions went unanswered due to the limited time, we would love to connect and address all of the questions individually. Please share your questions and availability in the webinar survey right after the session ends. With that said, I will sign off for today. And thank you again, everyone, for attending this session. And thank you, special thanks to Vivek for taking out his time. And I'll catch you in the next webinar. Thank you for your time.